Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to a rant about things related to books and publishing and the bookish world and readers. This video was inspired by a much kinder, gentler version of this created by Melinda over at Web of Stories. Leave a link to her video down below. And I saw that Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading also made a tag out of this. She weaponized Melinda's video. I'll leave a link to Kelly's video down below as well. I didn't want to do the tag because what I have to say doesn't really fit with the prompts, because as you may be aware, I do get angry from time to time, and I do go on the occasional rant. So I thought, hey, these kind people have given me an opportunity to rant about books. Now, before I go any further, I want to make it clear that what I'm going to outline here as problems are not problems I see widely in the part of BookTube in which my channel exists and the kind of channels that I watch and subscribe to, but I do see this commonly and widely when I go a little bit outside of that. So I'm going to talk about 4 things that absolutely infuriate me about the bookish world and the way in which people approach books and think about books in the United States. So the first thing that makes me mad, and the first thing I want to address, is male whining. The United States seems to be overrun with men whining about something, probably because we have a former president who is the whiner in chief, who complains about everything, who is always saying how mistreated and unfairly treated he is. And I think that's just rubbed off on a whole segment of the male population in the United States. And it also affects how I think a lot of men on, adjacent to, around, on YouTube, maybe adjacent to BookTube, think about publishing and think about themselves as being part of a persecuted minority who is being unfairly treated. And what they usually hear these folks say is that men can no longer get published. The publishing world has been taken over by, the forces of wokeness, and those woke people are not going to let men get published, and therefore we have, they claim that the bestseller list is dominated by women. They claim that book prizes are all dominated by women. They claim that, the literature that these men would be producing is going unproduced, and isn't that such a tremendous tragedy that these, men's books are not being published. And they basically claim that the whole publishing industry has turned against men and is unfairly treating men. So can I just say, this is just absolute nonsense. This is absolute nonsense. So the first thing I think that kind of points, what kind of nonsense we're actually talking about here is that, obviously men do get published. You will find books by men on the bestseller list. You will find books by men winning book prizes and book awards. You'll find books by men being reviewed in major review publications. I think what these men think is that they are entitled to the majority of that attention. And I'll talk about why this is just ridiculous on the face of it here in just a minute. But one of the other things I think is key to this issue and understanding why this issue infuriates me so much is that the men who complain about men being unfairly treated and not having a fair shot in the publishing world are usually men who look like me. That is, that they are white men, and they're usually men whose sexual orientation is the same as mine. They're usually white, straight men who are complaining about this. And you can tell that their bigotry is involved here because they seem to not ignore completely the incredible work produced by men of color, produced by men who are gay, produced by trans men, and just in general, they just act like those books don't exist. They act like those books don't receive recognition. And if you look at the prize award list over the last few years, you'll see that not only are men represented, they're a little bit overrepresented considering the percentage of the population they make up. I don't think it's a coincidence that sometimes when women win, they have to share the book prize that year with a male author. I don't think that's a coincidence. But what these white male whiners specifically are looking at is they don't see men who look like themselves winning these awards. They don't see men who look like themselves getting this acknowledgement, producing, literature. And they have a tendency to only focus on, those two things, books that sell the most and the books that win prizes. And they ignore the fact that, I believe it to be true that white males still dominate the world of nonfiction, and probably in terms of crime writing, and perhaps in terms of, horror. That we see the domination in those fields of white males and men in general, but overlooking the fact that Black men and Hispanic men and gay men win prizes, get published all the time, really, I think, shows the bigotry of these white male whiners. And while I'm on that topic, let me just kind of break down the numbers with you for you here. If you watch my channel, you know math is not my strong suit. But let's just talk about percentages. So, obviously I'm going to be looking at the United States. In the United States, about half the population is male. So let's say that's 50%. So that means that if we're just talking about by numbers, how many books, we're just going to go, let's just do this in the most egalitarian way possible. Then only 50% of books should be books published by men. Now, let's look at the fact that I think this is really a white male whining problem, a white straight male whining problem, and not just a male whining problem. Let's think about that 50%. Well, in the United States, 71% of the total population is white, which means that about 30% of the American population, the United States population, is not white. They are people of color. So that's 30% of the population, or that's 3/10. So we take 3/10 away from, 50%, we get down to 35%. Okay, so 35% of the American population is made up of white males. Okay, that's 35%. So in our egalitarian world, that means that white males should only be able to publish 35%. If we're just going to go based on percentage of the population, how they should be represented, that books published should represent the percentage of the population made up by any group, then that means that white males should only get 35% of the books published. But since these white male whiners also ignore the work of LGBTQ writers and male gay writers, and we know that about 20% of the population of the United States and the world probably would be in that LGBTQ plus group, that we have to subtract 20% from that 35%, which gets us down to 28%. I guarantee you, straight white male authors publish more than 28% of the books in the United States of America. So the idea that somehow we're being persecuted, straight white males are being persecuted by the publishing industry, is just not upheld by the numbers or by any basic facts. So my second problem then is closely related to that, and that is that I also hate gendered reading. I hate the idea that some people have, and this again is primarily a male problem, that the only books that can speak to them, the only books that they can relate to, are books that are written by men. And what they mean by this, generally speaking, is they mean that they want books that are edgy, that are tough, that, have bad language in them, that describe sex, that, are a little bit, outside the norm, and that people might be shocked by the material that's in them. And they assume that only men write these books. And they assume then that books written by women, books written by members of the LGBTQ+, particularly the trans community, can't possibly speak to them. And they kind of overlook the fact that we're talking about humanity, and human beings, regardless of any of the identifying things we put on them, are, very closely related and can understand one another. But they also overlook the fact that there are a lot of really incredibly edgy work in every sense of the word out there. I was thinking just quickly, My Dark Vanessa, the works of Clarice Lispector, the work of Akwaeke Emeze. These are not, these are not books which I think a lot of men look at these books and they think, oh, because the authors, they must be soft, they must not be for men, that men can't relate to them. And the opposite is true. These are edgy books which talk about and are relatable to all people. And so the idea of gender reading really just pisses me off. My third thing that irritates me, infuriates me about books in the bookish world is the idea that all the best literature is in the past. This is just complete sorry. The idea that the literature of the past is inherently better than literature being produced today is completely ahistorical. It just doesn't make sense. And we know this doesn't make sense. And we know this isn't true because we can go back and look at any point in history and you will find, again, primarily white male readers, authors saying, oh, the best books are behind us, and the greats are all gone, Dickens, Trollope, etc. are gone. You can, in the 1980s, you could say, you'd find men who, unfortunately, are probably a little bit like me at the time, who said, oh, well, the greatest age of American literature is behind us, Hemingway, Fitzgerald, these men are all dead, and those books never be published. And this is just, of course, just ridiculous. Great books are being published all the time. They may be different. They may read different. Synaptically, they may be different. They might be punctuated in a way that you don't like. It doesn't mean the book isn't great. It doesn't mean the work of art isn't as great. So the idea that the great books are all in the past just really infuriates me. And the final thing I want to mention that irritates me about books in the publishing world and the book world is the idea that publishing isn't a business. Okay, so the unfortunate truth is we live in the United States and in most of the Western world, we live in a world in which capitalism at least is a large part of the economic system. And that means that the big publishing houses, what are they? The big five publishers are in a competition with one another to sell product. Their product is books. They're not selling these books as a non-profit thing. They're not selling these books as a way of promoting an agenda. They are selling books to make money. So if the books that make money are the books that are written by women, they'll sell more books by women, or they'll publish more books by women. If the books that are selling more copies are books written by LGBTQ plus authors, they will publish more books by LGBTQ plus authors. That's the way business works. Okay, that's what business does, and publishing is a business, particularly when you're talking about the big five or the biggest publishers in the United States of America. Now, what a lot of people forget and what they choose not to pay attention to are smaller presses or independent presses who publish a wide variety of things oftentimes, and publish, focus and specially publish on, specific topics or specific places, and you can find great books there. So if you're like frustrated with the publishing world in the trends in major publishing, you're probably just not diving deeper than that top level of publishing. But publishing is not a nonprofit. It is a profit business, and the truth of the matter is the only agenda they're going to pursue is the agenda of making money. And so for us to expect different from them, I think, is really, really naive. And if you want to, see more variety, go to small publishing houses, go to independent presses, and vote with your ATM card, vote with your bank card, vote with your money for what you want to see published, because businesses will respond to people buying their products. Anyway, there you go. There is my list of, at least for right now, the 4 topics I wanted to rant about related to things about the bookish world, BookTube, that have been irritating me. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. And as always, thank you for watching.